Some farm skills were particularly sought after. William Aldred, seen here in the 1930s, was a broadcast scatterer. He cast seeds over a wide area, and this farming method dated back at least 1,000 years.
In the olden times, the Saxon used to broadcast all our corns and seeds like this. I've been a farming hand for 40 years, and I can sow seeds against anyone, and I can sow 10 acres of land with 10 pints of seed.
Street clearances were certainly one strategy used across Britain to make way for the towns and cities of the future. But it would have been a travesty to knock down too much of a historic market town like Ipswich. Indeed, many period properties were simply in need of a little care and attention. A more conservative approach to urban regeneration was employed in the case of the fine old buildings along Fore Street. Many historic properties at the junction with Duke Street had already been demolished by the mid-50s to make way for the Duke Street roundabout. Bucking the trend, however, an improvement scheme was launched in Fore Street in 1961. Instead of demolishing the old shops and buildings, a civic scheme was launched to brighten their appearance.
As there was so much derelict farmland about, it was not difficult to graze sheep. The lack of work saw village populations deplete, as people emigrated to industrial cities like Leeds or Manchester, or abroad to Canada in search of a new life. Rural poverty also caused people to leave. This is Docking in 1927. There was no mains running water, and people purchased their water for drinking or cooking from the water cart. It cost a halfpenny a pail. When the water tower was built and running water became available, the residents of Docking still only had one tap per lane.
Yarmouth was a prosperous and thriving town in the 60s. Much of this prosperity lay rooted in the holiday trade, with hordes of tourists descending upon the town every summer. The fishing industry, upon which medieval Yarmouth grew, was still of vital importance to the town at the beginning of the 60s. The docks were still a bustling hive of activity and provided work for many. But the 60s was a decade that saw Britain transformed, and coastal towns like Yarmouth experienced some of the starkest changes. Holidaymakers would continue to come to the town, but so too would some of the decade's volatility. Groups of mods and rockers would make headlines as young people rebelled against society. The increasing affordability of air travel was tempting people to experience foreign climes by the end of the decade. The British seaside holiday would soon go out of fashion. Prosperity would shift from the North Sea to the seabed below. Such changes created the town we know today. Thanks to television news, we are able to get a much better idea of what was happening on a day-to-day basis in the 60s than in previous decades. These images of the past are a welcome companion along memory lane. 'Cause 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 'cause
Steam was once a familiar sight in East Anglia. Most market towns had their own station, and the railway was part of the social fabric. The hiss of steam, the clank of the coupling, and the vast tenders heaped with Welsh coal were still a familiar sight in the 1950s. But in the same decade, private car ownership quadrupled, and many of the charming lines that had meandered through the wheat fields of East Anglia disappeared. With the need to modernise the network, the 1940s and 50s saw the end of many of the region's railways. Even when the lines survived, the romance of steam travel was slowly phased out.
I loved the work and I loved the steam engine ever since I was a boy. And I said then, as soon as ever I get old enough to get onto the railway, that's going to be my career.